Hey guys, the Sparkle Dash here, and I finally decided to make a part 2 of this series. Thank y'all for being so patient with me. Also, I finally bought a proper microphone, so hopefully the audio sounds a lot better now, because I was recording on my phone before this. I also wanted to correct a small mistake I made in the last video. Behemoth and Lavia weren't trapped in the dragon's body. Behemoth made the dragon, and their plan was to manipulate Kirill into transferring them into the body of the dragon, but that kind of failed and the dragon started going on a rampage. My bad for getting that wrong. If you ever hear me making a mistake in one of these videos, just tell me and I'll try to correct it in the next video. So without further ado, let's begin. Before I start with the actual 7 deadly sins portion, I have to mention a quick thing about Elika and Irena. So after the whole dragon rampage and rebirth date thing, Hel tasked Elika to collect the demon-possessed object before they could cause any harm, and Elika agreed to this because she was immortal now and had nothing better to do, I guess. Irena, now calling herself IR, did the same thing, but, to make more hers and destroy stuff, because she's a petty bitch and wants revenge on Elika. She also somehow has the ability to possess people, just don't question it, alright? So, in the year 113 EC, that's the Evillious calendar, a little boy is born with a small extra face on his right cheek. This boy would later be Cherubim? I'm calling him Sherry. I don't know how to pronounce that. After he was born, his mother committed suicide and his father locked him away in the basement, calling him a demon child. At the age of 10, he was found by his half-brother. Fuck it, I'm calling him Sati. The two began to secretly sneak out of the mansion together and met this girl called Gumina Glassheart, and the three of them became friends. Years later, Sati and Gumina got engaged, which Sherry wasn't too happy about, and he decided now would be a good time to confess his love for Gumina, who rejected him and mocked his ugly face. The next day, he murdered his entire family and staff and was planning to commit suicide by sword. Oh, but don't feel too bad for his brother, because he was totally planning to assassinate Sherry because Gumina wanted to break off their engagement, and he thought she and Sherry were having an affair. But before he could kill himself, he was approached by IR, who gave him the Venom Sword and told him to impale himself with it in order to make a contract with the Demon of Lust, and he was like, yeah, this seems legit, you weird magic cat lady. So now our boy has the power to seduce women with just a gaze, manipulate memories, and transform himself into some kind of winged demon. So Irena is like, hey, I know this really cool ritual that makes your powers work and guys too want to try, and Sherry, the absolute bi icon that he is like, fuck yeah. And then they fucked it up, and Sherry lost all his memories. Oh, and I forgot to mention, he also took his brother's face and identity, so Sherry, now believing himself to be Sati, wakes up thinking he's the only survivor of his family's massacre. So it turns out when you forge a contract with the Demon of Lust, you have to have, a lot of sex in order to keep your powers, so our boy is now horny 24/7 and locks himself in a room. At some point, Sati left the mansion just out of pure horniness and promptly collapsed in the middle of the street. He was rescued by a woman named Lucana Octo. The two hang out for a while, but Lucana was kind of uncomfortable around him, and I'm willing to bet that was because he was unintentionally being a giant creep. Sati questioned her about it, but she rejected him, which caused him to remember Gumina rejecting him and him murdering his entire family. So Lucana runs away, but Sati sprouts wings, which I think is very sexy of him, and goes after her, hypnotizes her, and that's basically the beginning of the harem. So he just keeps adding more and more women to his harem, and at some point he runs into Gumina, who he also hypnotizes. He's also not too happy about the fact that she seemingly still has feelings for Sherry, who is actually him. Oh, and Irena at one point asks him to seduce some queen because she supposedly has one of the vessels of sin or something, I don't know. Turns out this was a really bad move because the queen's lover actually finds the mansion and disguises himself as a woman and snaps him in the chest with the golden key, which was conveniently another vessel of sin, and he was going to die. The spell on the women was broken and they all left the mansion. Oh, and at some point Elika went up to Lucana and swapped bodies with her, which is why she has different colored hair in every song she's in. Great. More things to keep track of. Bianca Conchita lives in a household where everyone but her suffers from gula disease, which is a disease that causes the people who are infected to have extremely intense appetites. They have to satisfy this hunger for a period of 10 years. If they refuse to eat or eat non-edible objects, they just straight up die. Bianca was the only one who was not infected, and she was abused by her mother whenever she refused to eat. Eventually, she caught her mom eating one of their dead servants and her dad killing her afterwards when she tried to attack him. And as you can imagine, seeing your mom get brutally murdered by your dad isn't the best thing for your mental health, and Bianca became depressed and locked herself in the basement of the mansion. But she eventually became good friends with two of her new servants, Arte and Paolo, who were reincarnations of Hansel and Gretel. A few years later, she unwillingly got engaged to Carlos Marlon. Also, fun fact, Carlos is actually a descendant of the guy who killed Sati. Okay, that wasn't really a fun fact, but it's interesting. They actually hit it off fairly well until she sees a soldier with a wine glass of Conchita that they had apparently taken from Elika, and this triggered her trauma from childhood, and she desperately began eating all the food that was still left. Horrified at this behavior, the Marlon family called off the engagement. In the years after, Bianca traveled all around the world to become the Evillious equivalent of a food blogger, basically, until her dad died of a heart attack. A few months after that, she was diagnosed with organ abnormalities caused by her constant overeating. She was visited by the demon of gluttony, who offered to make a contract with her so she wouldn't, die, and at first she declined, but eventually gave in and made a contract. She could now eat whatever she wanted without her body suffering any consequences. This contract apparently also allows her to raise anyone who died from gula disease from the dead, so she brings back all her old servants. It's like a family reunion! Hooray! Speaking of a reunion, Carlos gets hired as Bianca's cook. One night she gets drunk and becomes pregnant with Carlos's child. Oh, right, she's also sending her undead army to attack neighboring villages or something, but who cares? More Bianca and Carlos being cute together, please! You think alcohol wouldn't have an effect on her since, poison and other stuff doesn't work? But whatever. Oh wait, never mind about the cute stuff. Carlos tries to poison Bianca and himself because he is justifiably horrified at what she is doing. So he dies, but it doesn't work on Bianca, obviously. Seriously, he's been cooking her dishes with poison this entire time. Why did you even think this would work? She ends up eating him. Feel like I've heard this somewhere before. But psych! The thing that Carlos tried to poison Bianca with was a medicine made from the powder that was scraped off the golden key, aka another vessel of sin, which, why the fuck would you give your child a medicine that is made from the key that your great-great-grandfather stabbed a dude with? Seriously. The demon tells Bianca that the baby she had with Carlos is the vaccine, and in order to not die, she'd have to eat it. She was about to do it, but in the last minute pulls an Uno reverse card on the demon and eats herself, allowing her to become the new demon of gluttony. This part I'm going to make into its own video because I'm pretty sure this is the longest out of all the stories, and the script is already almost as long as the last video, and I'm not even halfway through yet. Eve, who was possessing the clockworker's doll, because she's now the demon of sloth for some reason, took the place of the dead baby Margarita Felix. Growing up, she was never tired and never slept, much to her dismay. As part of an alliance between her family and the Blankenheim family, she got engaged to Caspar Blankenheim, who was just an absolute scumbag who only agreed to marry her because she had money. So soon after they get married, he starts sleeping around with a bunch of other women, and Margarita understandably doesn't really like this, but puts up with it for a while. At some point, Caspar gets involved with a criminal organization called Père Noël, which Margarita also starts working for at some point. Also, Elika, Irena, and Hansel's reincarnations are there somewhere, just don't worry about it. So she starts making a bunch of different poisons, kills her husband and basically an entire town. Her memories of Eve also begin to reawaken a little, and she wanted to sleep in order to become more human and drank the final poison she made, committing suicide. Except she doesn't technically die, she just fully becomes Eve again. Eve tries to go back to her old house in the forest, but Elika is waiting for her there so she could destroy her because she's starting to get really tired of all the demon's bullshit. She takes Eve's soul out of the doll and takes it into her own spirit somehow. Oh, and this doesn't really have anything to do with the sloth story specifically, but like 2 years after Margarita died, there was some kind of battle between Irena, Elika, and some other people I don't care about, and that resulted in Behemoth being yeeted out of Elika, and Irena, Eve, and Lavia being merged into a single entity called Ma. I can see why people find the story confusing. This character changed appearance twice now, and souls like 3 times. Kayo Soto is the daughter of the Demon of Envy, who swapped bodies with Kagura Octo so she could marry a tailor. Side note, as I am reading this, I find out the Demon of Envy is Lavia's mother, so that's a fun fact for you, I guess. So, Kayo took over her father's tailoring business after he died, and while after that, she married her fucking cousin? So, she had a kid with her cousin, until a year later, a fire broke out, separated her from her husband, and killed her son. Sometime after she recovered, she ran into Ma, and the two switched bodies. God damn it, Ma! Stop switching bodies, we just went over this. God, this script is getting pretty long. Okay, so Kayo starts having these dreams about murdering this random guy, Kai's whole family out of jealousy, but she later learns he was the one who started the fire that killed her family because he's racist, I guess. So she plans to kill his entire family out of revenge, which, like... Am I missing something? Because this seems to be more of a wrath thing than an envy thing. I mean, I guess she was jealous that Kai's entire family survived, and hers didn't, but whatever. So she goes ahead and murders his wife and 2 daughters, one of whom is Rillian's reincarnation for some reason, but I haven't talked about her yet because Pride gets its own video. She wears the clothes of her victims to murder Kai. She gets caught and executed, ironically by the kid she's been living with because she was convinced that he was her long-lost son, but that's one of those things you wouldn't really get unless you read the books, because it sure as hell isn't in the songs. And can we also talk about how brutal Kayo's execution is, because they attempted to behead her like 3 times and it just didn't work because of the power of the Demon of Envy? It's kind of traumatic when you think about it. Ugh, this is so much information. So here's a lightning round of shit you need to know about these two. So this bastard's name is Galarian Marlin, who, oh dear fucking god. I know I made the Alabama joke for Kayo already, but this is somehow even worse. So this guy is Ma's son, but he didn't know her personally, but then later he meets her and has a kid with her, making Nemesis both his daughter and half-sister. Ugh. So this guy had another daughter named Michelle, but she died by giant octopus. But Ma gives him the Clockworker's doll and says Michelle's soul is in it, but it's actually Irena's soul, who also got yeeted out of Ma's body, and I'm just really confused about who's who now and which souls actually make up Ma. Galarian starts collecting vessels of sin because Ma told him that it could grant wishes, and he wants to use it to cure his disabled daughter, aka the doll he carries around. Blah blah blah, taking bribes to declare people innocent in court, blah blah blah, we all know what happened there. And this girl is named Nemesis Soto, daughter of Ma and Galarian. She's one of Lavia's reincarnations. She was abandoned by her mom in the forest, finds an octopus that is actually Seth, remember that bastard, in disguise, who is now the Demon of Wrath, tricked her into making a contract with him, and as we all know by now, a contract with a demon usually doesn't end up well. She joins a gang, ends up in prison, starts working for her father, not knowing he's her father, falls in love with some cop guy or something, gets ordered to kill that guy by her father, then tries to kill herself, but can't because fucking Seth, who else? At some point, a civil war breaks out because, you know, that's what can happen when the most powerful, corrupt judge in the land starts accepting bribes from war criminals. I don't know, some stuff happens between Adam and Galarian, fucking Sickle shows up for some reason, Nemesis shows up at his house, sets it on fire, and tells him to give her his money, and maybe she'll let him live, but this Mr. Krabs-ass motherfucker refused, and Nemesis shoots him in the head.